Order the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've got all these pundits on the other side of the House today about polls. They're all these pundits. All these pundits. I noticed the member for Mayo up there gesticulating, but this is what he had to say recently about it, about the by-election, about Canberra. He said, let me get in first and say this by-election is much ado about nothing, he said. The fact is, this by-election to be held on March the 25 will give little, if any, insight into who will win the next general election. Well, you see, you're not wrong all the time. You're not wrong all the time, Curly. You're not wrong all the time. And he goes on to say, Mr. Speaker,
Order.
I've actually given a good head of hair to the nation, more than you've done.
Order.
Do you disagree? Do you disagree with Tasmanian Labor leader Michael Field when he says, and I quote, that the federal government has grown out of touch with Australians and that the government's arrogance and complacency had contributed to Saturday's by-election result?
Order the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Field didn't win his last election. We can all make judgments about that. I won mine, so there we are. And when one thinks, Mr. Speaker, about the former leaders like Doug Anthony and John McEwen, both of whom I sat with in this Parliament, it is a joke today, the National Party, a joke. And that's why you're dragging your tails along through the New South Wales election. And you are such a joke that the bar is set so low for you, Mr. Fischer. One of the great indecencies of media comment is they set the bar so low for you. If it was set anywhere near the rest of us, you would trip every hour of the day.
The new Liberal member for Canberra, Brendan Smyth, sworn into Parliament that morning, started asking questions immediately.
I asked the Prime Minister, have you listened to the people? What was the message you heard? And will you now tell my new constituents, many of them former Labor voters, whether or not their interest rates and taxes will go up again?
Order the Prime Minister. Order.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, he's asked. Well, when we get around the answer, Mr. Speaker, when we get past the guffawing hyena opposite here, Mr. Speaker, I'll give an answer.
Prime Minister.
Speaker, this is my first opportunity to see the member for Canberra, and of course I'm glad to take his first question, and obviously, naturally, I congratulate him on his victory. Of course I do, Mr. Speaker. But let him. I sat almost in the same position in the old Parliament when I first came here.
Very interesting.
I did. Well, it is very interesting. It was
Gippsland.
26 years ago, and I used to ask John Gorton questions. Let me just tell you this. It's a little bit of a commentary on history. But when the Leader of the Opposition was Treasurer, he was the most worried person in the world in the last year. After we became the government, he was the happiest, because all of a sudden the burden has shifted to some crowd who could actually do something about it. And he works on the basis, if you stay here long enough, the cycle will repeat itself. That's the one part of the lesson you shouldn't take any notice of.